Welcome back. You should have tried example 4 on your own. So now let's go ahead and go through this. So it says that angle 1 is complementary to angle 4, meaning that they create a 90-degree angle, or they sum to be 90 degrees. It also told us that angle 2 is complementary to angle 3, meaning those two angles sum to be 90 degrees. It also told us that ray RT bisects angle SRV, meaning that these two angles will be congruent. Now we're trying to prove that ray TR bisects angle STV. So we need to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So let's start with one of our givens to help us here. So we can start with the fact that ray RT bisects angle SRV. So that's going to be our first statement. Okay, how did we know that? Well, that was a given. Now looking, we need to see, okay, what does that statement, so statement number 1, tell us? That's going to tell us that angle 3 and angle 4 are congruent. And how do we know that? Well, we know if a ray bisects an angle, then the adjacent angles are congruent. All right, so now let's think. Now, what does that help me with? Okay, well, we were also given two other pieces of information. We were given that angle 1 is complementary to angle 4, and angle 2 is complementary to angle 3. So we can actually use both of them here. So we can say angle 1 is complementary to angle 4, and angle 2 is complementary to angle 3. Notice that in the step prior, we proved, or we stated, that those were congruent. How did we know that angle 1 was complementary to angle 4 and angle 2 was complementary to angle 3? Well, that was a given. Okay, well now I can state that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. And why can I state that? Well, that's because we proved that angle 3 and 4 were congruent, and if two angles are complementary to congruent angles, then they are congruent. So if two angles are complementary to congruent angles, then they are congruent. Okay, now the last thing. We proved that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent, meaning that I just proved that ray TR bisects angle STV. So we can say ray TR bisects angle STV. And that's because if two adjacent angles are congruent, then their shared ray is an angle bisector. Notice how adjacent's capitalized. And that's how we proved it. So our two things we need to know about angle bisectors, well, one statement that will always be true is the one we just wrote. And the other one will be that if a ray bisects an angle, then the adjacent angles are congruent. Awesome job. At this point, you are finished with your two proofs, and you may get started on your homework for tonight.